Welcome to The Social Issue with me, Sam Marshall, brought to you by socialtv.co.za. Today, we're joined by Kelo Kubu, Country Director for South Africa at CorpsAfrica. Founded in 2011 by Liz Fanning, CorpsAfrica empowers young Africans to drive sustainable development within their own communities. The organization launched in South Africa. Kelo will share insights into their mission, the impact of their volunteers, and how CorpsAfrica is fostering change across the continent. Kelo, thank you very much for joining us. Maybe let's just start at the beginning very quickly. I know the organization started in 2011. It operates as a catalyst for change and empowers young Africans. Can you tell us just the inspiration behind why this was such an important institution to start, and maybe also how you have evolved over the years?
Thank you so much for the invitation and for the opportunity to talk about CorpsAfrica. So yes, we did start in 2011. The founder, Liz Fanning, was a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco. And maybe some of your viewers, listeners might be aware of the Peace Corps. It's an American organization that sends volunteers to foreign countries for up to 2 years to volunteer in rural communities. So when Liz was working in Morocco, she kept getting questions from Moroccan young people saying, how can we be part of this? We also want to make a change in our own communities. Why is it always Americans? And that is the inspiration for starting CorpsAfrica. And by virtue of her working in Morocco, the first office was in Morocco in 2011. The operations started really taking off in 2013. And to date, we operating in 10 countries. South Africa is country 11. We just launched 2 months ago. And really the vision is to have CorpsAfrica in all 54 African countries.
Yeah, and you know what? It sounds like such an amazing story. And for me, when I read through the information that was sent, this is like a no-brainer. It's like almost somebody should have come up with this even before 2011. Like it's just an absolute no-brainer to take young local change makers in their communities to deal with the dynamics of that community. Just talk to me about using local champions to deal with local issues.
I think, just to your point of this should have happened a long time ago and it should be a no-brainer. There is a sense, at least when you are a young person, especially growing up in a village, the aspiration is to go get a formal education, go to the city, get a job in the city, and the financial stability that you will get in the city, then you can send money home. That's kind of the framing that most societies, at least in this part of the world, have. But there is another version that says, take the expertise and what you have learned and be of service to your community before you embark on your long-term career or journey. And I think this is where, people sometimes say, there is development work that happens in rural communities, but we tend to maybe neglect the capital and the assets that a combination of young people and communities have to amongst themselves figure out solutions and bring about change. So this is really for us to say, as young people, you can go and be of service to your community, learn something. Our model is also not just to place young people as volunteers, but we do a lot of intense training, because coming out of a university, you've been doing theory and learning a profession for 3-4 years, but most of it's just theoretical. And you hear a lot of young people saying, but when I apply for a job, I'm being asked for experience. Where is that experience going to come from? And this is one of the platforms that can offer that practical experience and an opportunity to just discover yourself before you settle on a long-term career.
And maybe a necessary follow-up question is to talk about, does this approach shift the dynamics of community development in Africa? For example, could it particularly maybe reduce the reliance on external aid?
We hope so. From the examples of other countries where CorpsAfrica has been operating, there is positive change and positive impact. So unlike traditional development models where an NGO will come and say, oh, you need water, or you need a clinic, or, we can set up a vegetable garden here for you. Our approach is to go to a community and say, you are the custodians of your lives, you live here, you know what the challenges are. And most of the times, communities actually know what the solutions are. They just need the resources and skills and capacity. We use a human-centered design approach where we go in and listen and co-create solutions. And the solutions that we create are not top-down approach where we impose solutions on communities. And when our volunteers leave those projects that they have been working on, more than 70% of the times, the communities themselves continue to solve the problems for themselves. And I think for us, this is where hopefully we could shift or change the narrative when it comes to development in rural Africa, that it's not someone who's going to come from somewhere and solve your problems. We can solve the problems together with other members of communities and also other young people who are not necessarily in the volunteer program, because we send one volunteer to a community to work with other community members, and the hope is that even other young people in that community will also be inspired and be part of solving development challenges where they live.
I can only imagine that when you operate in 10 countries on the continent, you experience very different circumstances. The ideal, as you've mentioned, the ideal approach is this human-centered approach to development, not this top-down approach. But I can imagine that every country is very, very different, and the experience of 10 countries and now adding South Africa as the 11th country, South Africa comes with its own challenges. What are you specifically focused on in South Africa, and what are some of the goals that you've identified for South Africa? And even maybe in that question, there is a point about challenges. How do you see South Africa as the 11th country and now being a 2-month-old an organization in South Africa, but you've operated since 2011 on the rest of the continent?
Yes, thanks for that question. So South Africa comes with a lot of dynamics. I think firstly, we are the most urbanized country on the continent. So the idea of a rural community is slightly different from other parts of the continent. So when I first joined the organization, my first question was, how rural is rural? So you find in other parts of the continent, rural means there are no tarred roads, there is no electricity, there is no running water. So some of our volunteers would go into communities where providing a small solar energy solution is the first time that community gets some of electricity. In South Africa, I think, I don't have the exact figures, but I think about 80 to 90% bar load shedding of the country has electricity at some point. So the challenges are different. South Africa is quite urban. And also, I think in South Africa, young people, not just in South Africa, in most parts of the world, young people aspire to being in urban areas and getting jobs in big corporations. So there is a bit of education and a mental shift to say going to a village is not going backwards. You actually will come out having learned quite a lot. And I think one of the challenges that in these 2 months I've seen is the idea of service and the idea of volunteering. When you mention the word volunteering, people say, oh, no, I want a job that's going to pay me. So the volunteer program does come with a stipend. But I have found that young people, or maybe not being exclusionary to young people, people are not eager to volunteer. In my other life, I've been doing volunteer work on a different organization for about 15 years. And I've realized that when you tell people that you actually have to give back, not when you are 50 and rich or 50 and using your pension money as a contribution to society, but you have to start giving back even when you are in high school or even when you are, just fresh out of university. Other countries have a prescribed military service. We are not one of those countries where there is a legal requirement to go serve in the army. But I think we need to revisit what it means to be a citizen and what is your obligation to serve your fellow citizens. So this is something that I'm hoping that we can inculcate in young people to say, you have to start thinking about volunteering as part of being South African. And I'm hoping through this platform, we will build that culture.
I love that. And I think it's very, very important that we start having these meaningful conversations around volunteering, because it almost feels, and I'm sure that you can either agree or disagree with me, it almost feels as if volunteerism currently in South Africa has become the vestige of corporates. It's what we do with our staff on those big days, and we go and volunteer. But to get this culture of young people to just think about volunteering as part of personal development, personal growth, but what does it truly mean to be a South African? With you highlighting that challenges, how are you as an organization at CorpsAfrica going to tackle that? What is the practical things you do on the ground to get young people to start looking at volunteerism, not as a dirty word, but as a way for personal development, but also for potentially job growth? Because I've seen organizations, I've interviewed many organizations. Obviously, not all the volunteers are absorbed, but the shining stars, the bright sparks, they always get hired and they always get referred. So how do you start that conversation in a meaningful way?
I think, to your point, the people who actually put a bit more effort, who put more, more time and resources into volunteering, they come out of it having learned a lot and actually having gained valuable skills that make them employable. So our program just maybe to talk a bit about what anchors the program. So we have in the 12 months, 3 months of it is actually training. We do training in human-centered design. We do training in asset-based community development. We do a lot of training in project management, in financial literacy, in business plan development. And those training modules are actually, you get a certificate out of it. We're working in other countries. Obviously, South Africa is new, so we're still establishing relationships with relevant organizations to say, in the 12 months, 3 months of that, you will come out with certificates that are, one, going to add to your qualifications, but two, these are skills that you would not have learned at a university. And secondly, the program offers a stipend. It's an allowance. The expectation is that the volunteer will stay in a community for that year, living with either a host family or renting a room in someone's home. So you do get the practical skills of, living in I won't say foreign, but in an environment that's not familiar, that might not necessarily be comfortable. So you're going to build a lot of resilience. The project work that our volunteers do is co-creating, not always and not as a prerequisite, but we encourage income generating projects. So you will learn how to put together a business plan, how to actually launch a project and actually start and see it to finish. And that's an opportunity that, not everyone is going to give you when you are fresh out of university. We do give a seed capital to the project. So 3 months into the volunteering year, the volunteers come up with a page. They say, I've been with this community for 3 months now, and this is what we've decided we are going to do. They present the proposal, the idea to a team of experts. And as an organization, we give them a $2,000, I think to the rent is just under 50,000 to actually start the project. And at the end of the year, they will then hand over the project to the community. These are opportunities that you're not going to get if you walk into an organization to start a job. It might take a while before someone gives you 50,000 rands and say, go experiment and see what you can come up with. So those are some of the benefits that we say, yes, it's a volunteer program, but at the end of that year, you are going to come out having really gained valuable skills that, one, you could decide to be an entrepreneur. There are some examples, from other parts of the continent where the volunteers then decided, you know what, I've got the entrepreneurship skill and I think I've identified an opportunity in this community and I can scale my project to other parts of the country. And one last bit, which we haven't added yet in South Africa, is that there is a year two to the program, which is an exchange program. So the year one is you volunteer in your own country, in your own communities, but you can apply to go volunteer in another country. And I think it will be really important for young South Africans. We don't travel much in South Africa, obviously it's been 30 years since democracy, but my explanation is that we have not been exposed to traveling on the continent. So this is also a chance for young people to go volunteer in other parts of Africa and maybe get a better understanding of the continent.
Yeah. As we wrap, we've got less than a minute. I wanted to just quickly ask you, and just for you to name and fame your partners, because it's not easy to run a project like this. And I, from the information, saw that the MasterCard Foundation is one of your partners. But it's a very obvious question, but I think it's an important question to ask. Partnerships, you can't run projects like this without having the right partners on board.
Yes, thank you. So MasterCard Foundation is our main partner. Currently in South Africa, our only partner. We are new, so we are looking at more partnerships in the new year. And like any partnership, people, organizations want to see what have you done. So we are also hoping to use this first year in South Africa and our examples from other parts of the continent to talk to South African corporates to say this is something that you can be part of, and hopefully they will.